Welcome to the Love Doc Podcast. I'm your co-host, Raina Butcher, here with your host, Dr. Sarah Hensley, the owner and CEO of The Dating Decoder. Hi, Dr. Hensley.
Hi.
All right, Dr. Hensley. So today, episode 5.
Yes.
We're going to talk about something that, again, may or may not be controversial. But we've already decided that we're here because we want to be authentic. We want to be our true selves. And the people who are here for it will show up. And the people who are offended by it will go bye-bye.
And haters drive traffic, so
That's
whatever.
Right. That's right.
And haters don't bother me.
That's right. I know. And again, I'm working on that.
You're like, they do a little bit for me.
I really like to be liked.
I've told, you know what the crazy thing is? I have 0 F's to give about being liked.
I know.
Like it's gone.
I know.
From me.
I know. And I'm sort of envious of it, but at the same time, like I want to keep, this isn't the subject of this episode, but there's this part of me that I want to keep part of it. I want to keep part of wanting to be liked because it's part of who I am. So, but that's not what this episode is about. Okay. This episode.
I really want to ask why, but we shall move on.
Yeah. Well, and you can coach me later on that. This episode is specifically about victimization.
It is.
Living in victimhood, staying in victimhood, and how that really, really inhibits you from reaching your attachment security.
Absolutely.
So there's so many directions this could go in. We both have, of course, tons of personal experience from our own victimhood and the victimhood of our parents.
Yep.
But specifically within your practice, what do you usually see within the dynamic of partnerships when one partner is maybe living in their victimization?
Yeah. So it's, all my partner's fault. Our relationship sucks because they're awful. I contribute nothing bad. I'm perfect. And they're the problem, and I'm just the victim of their crappy behavior.
Yeah. And really just no self-reflection.
None.
And when we talk about victimhood is complex, and that's why I said it can go in so many different directions, because a lot of times people don't realize they're living there.
Yeah, it's the super glue to hell.
Yeah.
Dr. Henry Wright, who is a pastor and founded Be in Health Ministries, which was a ministry that changed my life profoundly. A famous quote from him is, like, victimhood and self-pity is the super glue to hell. If you want to stay stuck in hell, just be a victim.
Yeah.
And I don't want to offend people who have been through trauma, because I have had some trauma.
Sure.
And there's a time and a place to be a victim, but you can't live there.
Right.
Because you can't grow and you can't move forward. And we've studied, for example, why people can somehow experience trauma and move into what we call post-traumatic growth, where they integrate that trauma into their nervous system in a way that allows them to actually become more resilient over time and stronger. And then the people that developed post-traumatic stress disorder, even complex post-traumatic stress disorder, where they are unable to integrate the trauma into the nervous system in a way that promotes well-being and functioning and growth, but instead inhibits their growth and development and keeps them stuck in pathologies of anxiety and depression and,
So what is that science? Do you know it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a huge component of how we both search for meaning of what happened to us and how we solve for solutions. Actually did my master's thesis partially on this topic. So when we experience...
So you definitely know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I know from personal experience of being a trauma survivor, and I've had some serious trauma.
Yeah.
There are times when we spend our time after trauma searching for meaning. Why did this happen to me? What does this mean? Why me? What could I have done differently? And there's a lot of like these hypothetical elements. It's very abstract. It's very, there's no definite answer.
Right.
To that question. So you could ask it forever into eternity. Right.
And maybe never get the answer.
And maybe never get a real answer that fits with you. Right. And then there's, okay, I can't change this. This is done. It's finalized. And if I spend all of my time feeling sorry for myself and blaming everybody else for what has happened, I rob myself of the chance to grow, to become stronger, to learn from this, to help other people.
Experience true joy.
And experience true joy going forward. You're robbing yourself of the opportunity to experience joy in your life.
And I think if you really think, again, physiologically, it's the root of disease.
Oh, it's a big component of disease. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about self-pity, which is the main component of the construct of victimization. It's an anesthetic. Self-pity is the best Xanax out there. And so it's addicting.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
If you are, oh, poor pitiful me, I'm so, this happened to me and nobody understands. And it's a form of self-soothing. And it's why it's hard to step away from it. Right? Yeah. Because we soothe ourselves and we don't have to confront the ugly truth about ourselves, about why we're stuck, or about, and this is really hard, even some of the things that contributed to you being victimized. Now, for some people, it was not 1 ounce their fault.
Sure.
They are a true 100% victim.
Yeah. We want to be clear on that.
Let me be extremely clear. There are people that are assaulted, that are physically harmed, that are emotionally harmed, and they had absolutely no role in that.
Right.
But there are others who did play a role in their own victimization. And that's hard to face.
It is.
And I will say I played a role in my own victimization.
Same. Hands raised.
I did.
Both of mine.
Because I chose to stay.
Yeah, I kept making poor decisions.
On and on and on and on with someone who victimized me over and over and over again. And I know all about battered woman syndrome. I know I used to work in the domestic violence field. I am educated about why women stay in abuse. I am an expert on trauma bonding.
Yeah.
And so I know why I couldn't leave. But at the end of the day, I eventually did. So, and then when I did, and there was the other side of that, there was this one day that I realized, like, my participation in that was always voluntary.
Yeah. Yep.
You are not a victim at a certain point in time. You're a volunteer in that situation. And that is an ugly, hard truth.
That a lot of people don't want to face.
That is so hard to take.
Yeah. And I know, we were just talking about this on the way here, because I think it was episode 3 that I openly talked a little bit about my sexual promiscuity. And then I actually went back and started thinking about, like, well, was it promiscuity or was it really sexual trauma that I experienced with my ex-partner? And, I even told you on the way here when I was talking about it, it's hard for me to say that it was trauma, even though it was, without getting too far into it. But I still played a role, right? I still played a role in it. And I can only take accountability for that portion of it. I can't take what he did, right? As much as it was very manipulative, I can't do anything about that part. All I can do is take accountability for my role in it.
Right.
Recognize it, try to heal it, most of all, try to release it. Try to release the shame around it.
Absolutely. And de-shaming is a huge part of being able to let go of victimhood.
Yeah.
And shame plays such a negative role in so many of our lives. And it is the block that prevents people from moving forward, because there's shame when you're victimized. Even if
when you play a role.
Yeah. But even when if it's 0% your fault, even if you are 100% a victim, there's still shame.
Yeah.
That, like, how did I end up here?
Sure.
Like, and people that are traumatized, like people that have who have been raped, they constantly look back and say, what could have I done different? Could I have taken a left instead of a right? Should I have remembered to lock my door? Should I have not had that last drink? And that shame is so unwarranted.
Yeah.
And it is so harmful, and it keeps people stuck.
Yeah.
And I really want people to be able to heal that shame.
Yeah. Shame has been something that I feel like in the past few years has really come to the surface for me in terms of like facing my own shame and really just trying to release it. Because as I get older, I just recognize it so much more in my body and how how my body feels when it comes up. And so again, because you're a professional, we want to know. We want to know the secrets. I want to know the secret, right? Of really how you release that shame, how you let it go once and for all. Because processing is one thing. Process your shame. You think about, the circumstance that maybe created the shame and the map from that point to this point. But how do you let it go? Because, I was laying in bed thinking about this last night. It still lives in my body.
Yeah. I've made incredible progress. It is a journey.
Yeah.
I have not reached the final destination.
Yeah.
Because my body will flare up under stressful conditions that I don't see coming, right? Where I feel cognitively okay, like I'm not stressed in my mind, but my body is experiencing the stress and the symptoms. And here's the thing. We have to start to meet our basic needs in order to release shame. We have to stop having shame around this idea that we have basic needs.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound wild, but it starts at Maslow's fundamental bottom rung hierarchy of needs. Even things like eating when you're hungry, sleeping when you need to sleep,
peeing when you need
peeing
to pee.
when you need to pee.
Yeah.
That's how your body starts to trust you.
Yeah.
And it will, when your body starts to trust you, you do release some of that shame. It's not shameful that I need to get up and use the bathroom.
Yeah.
Or I could sit here and pound out 30 more minutes
Right.
of whatever I'm doing on my computer, right? Because I'm really in the flow, right? It's like there's this subconscious sense of shame that, oh, no, I'm stopping my productivity. I'm going to go use the restroom.
Yeah.
So that's at a very fundamental level of how we heal the shame in our body, okay? When we've been victimized or we've had trauma.
That's really beautiful too, because it seems like that's really simple to grasp, right? And people don't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll just pee when I need to pee and go to sleep when I need to sleep and eat when I need to eat. And then my body will feel better.
Right. But even we have so much shame even around just eating. As women, right? Find a woman that hasn't been on a diet. Good luck, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So shame is just woven into so many different aspects. But really what I want people to understand about healing from victimization, because victimization is meant to be a temporary state. It's meant to be a state where you are processing shock and you are trying to find your footing. And you need love and support and tenderness and, guidance.
And God.
And God. Oh, gosh. Yes, God. To do that. But once you've got your footing a little bit, you are at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And that crossroads is, am I going to continue to be angry, ashamed, doubtful, offended, like all of these really negative emotions? Am I going to live there and just continually try to seek some sense of justice that I may never get? Because the majority of traumatized people never get any justice.
No.
There's no righting that wrong. I believe someday God does it for us somehow, some way, because I believe we serve a just God, but most people never get any justice, right? And am I going to seek something that I'm never really going to get? Or am I going to make a conscious decision to be an overcomer?
Yeah.
I hate when people call me a victim. It makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
I say, no, I'm not a victim of trauma. I'm an overcomer of trauma.
Yeah.
I'm an overcomer. I am always an active overcomer.
Well, and that is justice, right? Because if you
It's
really
the best form of justice.
If you really think about justice and like the definition of it, you can go, the direction of like civilly, right? Law.
Yeah.
But true justice is if you just overcome.
True justice is inner peace.
Yeah.
That's inner peace, man.
Yeah. And not being this, walking ball of resentment towards everyone. I mean, again, this was something we were talking about on the way here with our parents specifically. Because, I know my mother lived a life where she felt life had victimized her.
Yeah, that was my dad. That was my dad too. And he was bitter and he was angry and he became a shell of a human being and he died on that hill.
Yeah, same.
And your mom did too.
Yeah, and died too soon.
Oh yeah,
as well. And something that I mentioned to you on the way here, she grew to resent her own children.
Yeah,
because of it,
for sure.
The people that she loved, like her children were her life. Yeah. The four of us were her life, but she resented us.
For sure.
Because in her mind, she couldn't see past the fact that when it came to her and my dad's divorce, she couldn't see her role. She could never acknowledge her role and take any accountability for that. It was just that he had victimized her. 4 days before she died, she was talking about how, it was... Your father did this and your father did that,
So there's there's so many things I want to say. My brain's going 90 miles an hour here because I'm so passionate about this topic.
Yeah.
There's something in psychology, there's a psychological concept called locus of control. Okay. And it's a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, we have what's called internal locus of control. And people who identify as having an internal locus of control truly believe that their actions matter, that the decisions they make and the actions they take produce the outcomes in their life, right? That they are largely in control of what happens to them in their lives and the outcomes of their lives, right? And then we have on the other end of the spectrum, external locus of control. And people who identify with an external locus of control believe outside forces largely control their life, like the government or more powerful people or luck or chance, right? Those are the factors that create the majority of the outcomes of their life. And when we look at their mental health, can you imagine who has better mental health?
Yeah.
Right? Those with and who are ultimately on pretty much all measures of success are more successful.
Yeah.
People that believe their actions matter.
Yeah.
Because why would you try if you don't believe that you're in control and that your actions actually create the outcomes in your life, right? And so people who have an external locus of control really identify with victimhood. They score high on measures of self-pity and victimization. And they're stuck.
Yeah.
They don't make progress because if you don't believe that your actions matter, that what has been done to you has ruined you, and there's no life after this, then I'm sorry.
Well,
you're not going to make much of your life.
Yeah, because it's the only thing you can control.
It is.
It's the one thing you can control in your life. Right. Is one, your own actions, and two, your mindset.
Yeah.
Your mental...
Your effort and your attitude.
Yeah. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but it's true.
Gosh, it's so true. It's so true.
What did you say? I can't remember a few episodes ago. Self-reflection. Self-reflection was everything.
It's everything.
And it's a huge component here too when it comes to victimhood. Because I don't without throwing my mother completely out under the bus, because she was a beautiful, wonderful, loyal, gorgeous, wonderful mother. And maybe if, she was still living today, we would have a different relationship. But the reason why we were at odds when she died, because this is something that I've had to process when it comes to my grief. But the reason that we were at odds is because I couldn't back down from her, or I wouldn't back down from her. When she would bring up these points that she wanted me to agree with.
Yeah.
And I couldn't.
Yeah.
Because it was it was such a victim mentality that I saw it, right, as her child, and she couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand that I would say things like, you can't stay here. If you stay here, you're only hurting yourself.
You're only going to stay miserable.
Yes. And then, she never really got to fully enjoy these things. And it makes me sad, right? Again, processing some of this within my own grief. It makes me so sad for her because she never really got to enjoy her grandchildren even because she even resented them and she had no reason to. So it's like, there's all these things that come into play when you live in that mentality of victimhood where it just makes you this person that you can't see or experience true happiness. And so it makes me really sad. It makes me so sad for her. And I think that ultimately it's what killed her.
Very likely.
Yeah.
Very likely.
Yeah.
Because when you're angry and you're bitter and you're anxious, you produce stress hormones and chemicals that wreak havoc on your body.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, I'm like, my mom died of a broken heart. But she kept breaking her own heart.
Because she couldn't move past
Yeah.
it.
She couldn't.
And you know what is integral for stepping out of victimhood?
What?
Forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me want to cry.
And forgiveness is the most freeing, most beautiful, greatest gift I ever gave to myself.
Yeah. Because it was the one thing my mom couldn't do. She could not forgive my father. She couldn't. And that's why she was stuck. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, honey. No, it's okay. All emotions are welcome here.
Yeah, that's right.
Emotions
space.
make us human, and we need to experience them, and we need to feel them. Yeah. It's okay to do that.
Yeah.
And you're human. Don't you apologize for your tears.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you know my story.
Yeah.
I'll kind of recap it for people.
It's a beautiful story. It's a comeback story.
But there's this fine line, right? There's this fine line that I teeter. It's a tightrope that I walk. The person that victimized me the most and hurt me the most was my ex-husband. He is also the father of my children, and he's also dead.
Yeah.
He's not here to defend himself. There's always two sides to every story. I'm not egotistical enough to believe that my side and my perspective is the only reality here.
Yeah.
Okay? And what he did to me, as well as his death, so profoundly impacted me, first bringing me into the depths of hell, but then ultimately leading to my comeback and my growth and my amazing life, which I never would have found without all of those experiences.
Yeah.
And so I struggle to talk about those experiences because I don't ever want my children to ever hear me say a negative thing about their father. Yep. That is not okay. Yeah, it is not what I want.
Yeah.
And how do I tell my truth and tell people how those really awful things that happened shaped me and helped me overcome and launched me into post-traumatic growth, which ultimately has led me to my best, happiest, most joyous life that I could have ever imagined. So how do I walk that tightrope? So I'm going to do my best.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, I mean, I think
I'm going to leave a lot of the details out.
You lead with how grateful you are for Jared. You know, oh God, are we both going to cry today? How grateful you are for Jared because, you know, he is ultimately the point of what catapulted you to where you are now. Yeah. And I think that, you know, the people that victimize us in our lives, you know, I mean, our own parents do it. So, you know, I mean, I love my mother and my dad so much, but I mean, there's a level of victimization even within my own, you know, childhood and everyone's. And, you know, you do walk that fine line of being able to tell these stories from a place of love. Yeah. So we'll just preface it with that. Okay. Like these come from a place of love.
And I'll preface it with there is not a single ounce of bitterness toward him. Yeah. Not a single ounce of hatred of any negative emotion towards him at all. Yeah. Yeah. And it is also true that some of the things that he did were horrible. Yeah. And that even after his death, the aftermath of his death was horrible. It was. You know, again, getting into specifics would be really hard to do, but it was really bad. Yeah. And like a lot of things came to light that were really, really hard. And when so context. Really bad marriage. There were some really awful dynamics that were very hurtful. Really ugly divorce. Lots and lots of money in family court. Addictions on his behalf, which ultimately killed him. And that's public record. I mean, people can Google it. Like, it's not.
Yeah, most people know that. Jared's from a small town. Everybody knows that.
Right. And that ultimately took his life accidentally. And he had just been married for 6 weeks right after he died. That was a huge complicating factor in a lot of the aftermath of his death. Mom diagnosed with pancreatic cancer right before that. You know, my dad was severely disabled, had dementia, wheelchair bound. So, of course, you know, who has to step in and care for both of them? That was me. I was with a dismissive avoidant who we all know broke up with me right when my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. You know, I could be angry at him, but I'm not. I became disabled with chronic vestibular migraine. It was truly disabling. It was truly disabling. And because my nervous system just fell apart. You can only have so many shock traumas in a row where and then your nervous system just says. And there were so many shock traumas during our marriage. It was like boom, 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 boom. For 10 straight solid years. And then my nervous system just went, you're done. You are absolutely done. And I think it was one of those things where my body just recognized, like, we have to give you something so severe that you have to lay down in the bed. Because you have used every resource. We have pulled from every last, you have no serotonin left. It's gone. There's not a single neurotransmitter that can help you left in your body. Right? Like, we have to give you something so disabling that it will force you
to just rest.
But I had 2 young grieving children and a sick dying mother and a disabled father and no one. There was no one. I mean, you were there for sure, but you had your own life and your own capacity. You know, you couldn't be my 24-hour caregiver either, right? And I was broke. I was so broke. I was living on credit cards. I was worried about how I was going to pay my mortgage payment. I mean, no child support, right? I mean, he's dead. It's not coming. I mean, thank gosh for Social Security death benefits when they kicked in. That was a absolute saving grace. And one thing that our 10-year marriage, you know, gave to me was, you know, that financial support, and it was a lifesaver. You know, gosh, I'm struggling to not give details. I'm really struggling to not give details because it's hard to not give context. But I wanted to die. This is so shameful, but I've had to work through this shame because the shame will kill you. But, and this is like demonic level, major demonic level, okay? I wanted to commit suicide, and I was angry at my kids that I couldn't commit suicide.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember you calling me. I mean, I remember you called me one day and you were like, I want to kill myself. Yeah. I'm so sorry, honey.
And I'm crying because I'm sad for that person.
Yeah.
Because it didn't need to be that way.
Yeah. But look at you now.
But then here comes the good part. Here comes the good part now that we've depressed you. Now that we've made you in a terrible mood.
Everybody's crying.
Let me tell you how I became an overcomer.
Yeah.
I had this chance encounter with this. I just posted in freaking Lex Mom, like the mom's group of Lexington, and was like, this is all the things that have happened to me, and I'm in the pit of hell, and I want to die, and I just need a mental health provider. Like, I need a therapist. I need somebody.
Yeah. You were desperate. I remember.
Like, beyond desperate. And Ashley, my friend Ashley, my beautiful, shout out to Ashley. I love you so much.
We love you, Ashley.
Oh my gosh. Talk about a believer. Talk about a rock solid human being. She took a chance. You know, she reached out to me in a private message and she said, I have something for you. I don't know if you'd be interested. She said, but God put it on my heart to tell you. I would just like to talk to you about Jesus. And no lie, my first reaction was like, eye roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that going to help me? Right? What's he going to do? Come down from heaven and save me from this?
Yeah.
But then he literally did.
Yeah.
And she gave me this challenge. And she said, this is going to sound crazy. She said, but just take 90 days. And I want you to seek the answer to this question. Who is God? She said, she said, definitely use the Bible for that.
Yeah.
But go to sermons. Like, use people that are knowledgeable about Scripture.
Look around.
Look around.
Yeah.
Like, just take it from all angles. She's like, make Scripture, take the Bible, make it your primary resource. But, feel free to, like, browse around different ministries and what people have to say. Right. And I want you to answer the question, who is God? And she helped me out. She gave me some starting resources. And oh my gosh, she was a lifeline. We Marco Polo'd every day.
I remember when y'all met.
Every day. And I would cry and she would lift me up and she would speak the word of God into me and over me. And I started getting better.
I remember.
And then I was better enough to do the work.
Yeah.
I was better enough to do the work on my attachment that I needed to do. But that was a side-by-side journey of my faith. And so I tried to answer the question, who is God?
Yeah.
So I dug into the Old Testament, and there's a guy named Tom Bradford who breaks down the Old Testament. He's an amazing biblical scholar. Because I grew up Catholic, and there was so much guilt in that religion. No offense to Catholics, it's just it didn't sit well with me. I know a lot of people. My mom's a very devout Catholic and gets so much out of it, and so it's we just had a different experience.
Right.
And I did not understand the Old Testament. My view of God was he was like this vengeful, punishing.
Sure.
Like God that just condemned you for not being good enough and not being, and so I just rejected that because I felt like, well, I'm never going to be good enough for God, so why even go there? But the answer to that question, who is God, is love. There's a one-word answer to that question, and it's love. And there's no other
simple
answer to that.
Yeah.
And once I truly understood the Bible, everything that God does is loving. Everything he ever did for his people was loving. Even the times where we hear about like God's wrath, that is completely misunderstood.
Yeah, 100%.
It's so misunderstood. And there's a lot of like translation and language barriers and things that play a role in that. And that's why to seek somebody who's truly an expert and have confidence that they are a biblical expert to help us understand a little bit more, because some of it is complex.
Oh, it's very complex.
I mean, I'm a New Living Translation Bible reader. Okay.
Me too.
I need the New Living Translation.
And
I
grew up in church. I'm a preacher's daughter, and I still don't fully understand it.
So, and then, when I got to know God, all it was I will never leave and forsake you. I will always work things for your good. Yeah. I will care for you. I will feed you. I will clothe you. I will make sure you're okay. Bottom line, I will give you strength to put one foot in front of the other until you are better. And so you don't have to be strong, and you are not alone. I am here. And like I didn't understand that level of faith. Like I didn't ever have that connection with God. Yeah. And for the very first time in my life, I found it. And the peace and the safety that's there cannot be replicated anywhere else. No. It can't be replicated through a friend. It can't be replicated through a spouse. It cannot be replicated through your children. It can't be replicated anywhere else. And you could not have convinced me of that, or you could have not brought me to this level of understanding by talking to me. Yep. I had to be in the pit of hell. I had to I had to be overcome with the most demonic, which I think suicidal ideation is the pit of demonic hell. That's the most oppression, right? And God taught me about gratitude, and he taught me about trust, and he taught me about faith, and he taught me about my own strength, that he gave me power, love, and a sound mind. Yeah. And and the word of God spoke into me and into me and into me and over me until where I believed it with my very core. Yep. And then I no longer identified as a victim. And you don't even know this. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this to you. But you said something really powerful to me during that time. And there was a period of time where you had to come to me with some tough love at a very tough time because you were like the only semblance of support that I had. And I was holding on so tight to you.
Yeah.
And you only had so much to give.
Yeah.
And you said this, and I've never forgotten it. And it was the absolute right thing to say, even though it was hard to hear. But you looked at me and you said, life traumatizes us all. And if you haven't been traumatized yet, it's coming for you.
Yeah.
I hate to be Debbie Downer, but it's coming for you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to lose somebody that you love. You're going to get sick maybe someday, or something's going to happen that is a trauma in your life. If you've escaped it thus far, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Praise Jesus. But it's coming for you because we live in a fallen world and it comes for us all at some point, right? And so you have to learn resilience.
And resurrection.
Yes.
I mean, that's really what it's about, you know? I mean, because I think we've both had these wonderful, beautiful experiences. And I think when you sought God in those moments, you probably started to see him in people.
Absolutely.
You know, because that's what Ashley was.
Oh,
she
was a walking light.
Yeah, he was just working through her.
Absolutely. And she tells me that.
Yeah.
When I say, oh my gosh, thank you for coming into my life. Thank you for having the bravery to talk to me that day.
Yeah.
Like, you profoundly changed the trajectory of my life and my children's lives. And then here I am, this business, and I speak to millions of people every day. I mean, I get millions of views on my videos all the time.
Yeah.
And so, and I get to speak the word of God. And so like that one message has had the ripple effect that is beyond what we can even imagine.
Yeah. Even for me. Because in that moment, it was difficult for me just based on what you just said. Because I knew that you were capable to pull yourself out. But I didn't have the tools like Ashley did, right? Like I wasn't that far into my spiritual journey like she was. And so it was like God gave you these stepping stones of circumstance and people. Because I think I probably said to you a few times, like when you got nothing left.
There was nothing left.
The only thing to lean on is your faith.
There was nothing left. There was no money.
Yeah, there was nothing.
No people.
Yeah.
There was no anything.
Yeah. And so you only have God to turn to.
Yeah.
And we've both been there. I mean, I've shared my experience when, I went through a terrible custody battle with my ex and in a place where I had no support system and it was awful, and I was basically fighting City Hall because we were in a small town,
town where his family ruled,
where they had deep roots, and I mean it was terrible without getting into all the details here, but I remember praying to God to save me because I felt like there was nothing left, and I still get goosebumps every time I tell the story. But I remember I was sitting out on my roof kind of with my knees up on, to my chest, just bawling, crying, praying. And that day, I felt the arms of God around me. And people they can think I'm crazy or they can say what they want, but I felt an actual embrace.
I believe you.
Like
I
when
wholeheartedly
I felt arms around me. And it was like from that point on, things, started to get better, right? Yeah. And it's this gradual process. But, I always say, ask and you shall receive in due time because God will always bring it to you.
Right. And here's the thing. Here's what I want people to know. The biggest question that people who don't have strong faith, usually ask is, well, then why is there so much evil in the world? And here's what I will say about that. And I made a TikTok video on this, and of course it went pretty viral, and I think it resonated with a lot of people, so I'll repeat it here. God is love, and God is everything that is good. God made the laws of the universe in a specific way. We have a little law of opposites, and we have free will. And when we have free will, we have total and complete free will. And so there's the law of opposites. So for the love, there has to be the evil. Right? There has to be an opposite entity to that because that law of the universe proliferates throughout the entire universe of all mankind, right? There's an opposite to everything. And so for the good, there is the evil. There is the fallen evil in the world. And evil is just absence of God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just the absence of God.
Yeah.
And Satan chose to make himself absent from God. So it was his choice. He used his own free will to separate himself from God, right? And so all the evil in the world is from the enemy. And people use their free will to align with God or align with the enemy every moment of every day. We make that choice. A lot of times unknowingly, right? Because we're not aware. And so God doesn't make any of these bad things happen. But he also doesn't interrupt our free will when we choose the enemy. And that has a big butterfly effect, right? A huge, huge butterfly effect.
Yeah.
And so we even think about like, oh, my mom, you know, she's having a really hard time wrapping her head around this. And she's like, well, what about little kids that get sick and die? How's that, you know, their participation with evil? And I'm like, it's not their participation with evil, it's somebody else's.
Yeah.
Right? And so we created a world full of toxins that have altered our DNA. We have, you know, generational trauma through epigenetics that modifies our DNA, that creates, you know, birth defects and chronic illness. So you have to see this as a very far-reaching ripple effect, right? And so no, did that little child that got sick and died, did they, you know, participate in evil? Most likely not, right? Like, no, they're a child.
But you're right.
But mankind has participated in evil, and that often affects innocent people. And because God can't interfere with our free will and the effects of our free will, he does not. Because if he did, then we would just be robots that he controlled and made us like love him, right? I mean, God don't play.
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
Free will is free will,
That's
right? And it is absolute free will.
And circling that back to victimhood, you know, I mean, victimhood is free will, right? Because you choose to live there.
That's right. That's right. And here's the thing about God. God, as soon as we sin and participate in evil and screw things up, God loves us so much that he jumps behind the scenes and starts trying to pull strings, trying to speak to our spirit, trying to speak into the spirit of other people that is going to create a butterfly effect that is going to work it for our good. And if we turn to him and we listen to his voice, I firmly believe God speaks to our spirit, the enemy speaks to our spirit, it manifests in our thoughts. And I talk a lot about, you know, metacognition and observing our thoughts, you know, in my coursework and in my coaching. But we can choose to listen to God's voice, and we can choose to step out of victimhood and step into the power, love, and sound mind that God gave us. And then we receive the blessings because God's directing our steps to get there, to get them, to receive them, right? He's like, go here, do this, say this thing, do this.
And you're actually listening.
And you're listening and you go do it, and then you win the prize, right? You get the blessing. It's like he's like trying to bring us there. But we can intentionally turn our back on that, listen to the enemy, stay in bitterness, stay in victimhood, stay in self-pity, stay in jealousy, stay in rejection, stay in all of the evil things that Satan brings us, and we don't hear the words to lead us to the blessing. And then we get more bad stuff. Right? So bad things happen to good people because we live in a fallen world. And it's not just us that participates in evil directly, but other people do as well. And that has a gigantic ripple effect on our world. And so how do we protect ourselves from that as much as humanly possible? We turn towards God and we hear the voice of God and we obey the voice of God. And it does not lead you astray, right? It doesn't mean that we won't fall victim to suffering from, you know, messing up and aligning with the enemy on occasion, or, you know, somebody else doing it that comes back to us in a ripple effect. But what it does mean is that you're going to live an overall peaceful, mostly joyous life, right? And whatever circumstance you find yourself in that feels like the pit of hell, he will pull you out and he will help you put one foot in front of the other until it gets better.
Yeah. And listen, a great place to start is the Word. Because I've learned that if I spend time in the Word, then I can hear God's voice more clearly just throughout my day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
You know, and listen, I know when it comes to spirituality and faith, it's intimate, right? It's very intimate. And everyone's journey is different and looks different. And, you know, again, we're here as really Dr. Hensley's here. I'm just here
You're here too.
I'm just here to agree and nod.
No.
No, but you say some really beautiful, profound things. But, we're here to guide you, and hopefully push you in that direction. And again, if you want to learn more about Dr. Hensley's services, it's not all a spiritual standpoint.
No,
you give secular.
No. Yeah, I always say all faiths are welcome in my practice, except maybe Satanism, because that probably wouldn't go over well.
Yeah.
And sorry, that's a tough
one. It
wouldn't do you any good.
It wouldn't work.
It wouldn't do you any good, okay?
It wouldn't work, yeah.
But I give a purely psychological, secular perspective, and then I give a spiritual perspective alongside of it, and I tell people, and I make them, all very separate. So I sort of, even in my courses that I do, my online courses, it's these are, if you don't want to watch these modules, you don't have to.
Right.
Here's the spiritual perspective. You can skip right over those if that doesn't land with you.
Yeah.
Right? I have all the psychology in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think
for
that's
you.
really beautiful. I think that's wonderful that you give those options so that everybody feels really welcome and comfortable. And so if you want to learn more about Dr. Hensley's services, visit her website at thedatingdecoder.com. And listen, guys, we got deep today. We cried.
I know. And I even thought, how can we make this a little bit more lighthearted? But it just wasn't going to get there.
We just kind of go with the flow. However it happens. And that's really the beauty of it. And that's really what we're here for. Again, we started this out we want to be as authentic as possible. And you know what?
That's right.
The tears are as authentic as joy. I always say,
absolutely.
Feeling sorrow is as normal as an emotion as joy and happiness. And we should welcome it. Because it it helps us release things. So we just are so honored and grateful for everybody who's tuning in and listening. And please, if you like the content that you're hearing, continue to tune in because we have so much more to come. And subscribe, follow, share, all the things. Go follow Dr. Hensley on all her social media platforms. And until next time, peace, love, and perspective.